1, and we should be good.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm glad everybody could join us today for our conversation about workers in Mississippi. We have 4 very special guests with us today. Our first guest is Miss Jaribu Hill. If you know anything about Miss Jaribu Hill, you know that she is a civil rights veteran here in the state of Mississippi. She began working in Mississippi in 1995 on voting initiatives with the Center for Constitutional Rights. This led her to become the founder of the Mississippi Workers' Rights Center for Human Rights, which organizes and advocates for low-wage, non-union workers in Greenville. And in 1996, she co-founded the Southern Human Rights Organizer Conference, which later became the Southern Human Rights Organizers Network, where organizers and activists throughout the South come together to discuss their struggles, share strategies, and build coalitions. Our next very special guest is Miss Sanchione Butler. She began her professional career with the United Auto Workers in 1988 at Ford Motor Company at the Dallas Parts Distribution Facility located in Dallas, Texas. And after becoming an international representative in the organizing department with UAW in 2008, she relocated to Mississippi, where she served as the lead organizer for the Nissan workers in Canton. And she returned to Ford Motor Company with 30 years of service as a union member, and with the United Auto Workers International with 10 years of service in 2018. And so she's passionate about the rights of workers, and she came out of retirement in 2019, and she's now working with the Mississippi AFLCIO as their political campaign manager. And she also serves as our co-chair of the Labor and Industry Committee. So welcome, Miss Sanchione Butler. Our next guest is Miss LaTonya Hamilton. She works at Siemens. She was appointed as the UAW Local 1956 Citizenship and Legislative Committee chairperson in 2011. She serves as UAW State CAP Vice President, and her responsibilities at UAW include increasing union membership and CAP participation. And she's also worked as an organizer for the Nissan campaign in 2012, 2014, 2015, and 2017. And last but not least, our fourth guest is Mr. Jay Jackson. Mr. Jackson began working for the city of Jackson in 2015 in the Parks and Recreation Department, where he started to work as an activist with the Mississippi Alliance of State Employees Communications Workers of America. Later that year, he was voted vice president of Local 3570 under the leadership of Brenda Scott. And he prides himself on being a voice for the voiceless, and he has done work with the People's Assembly, as well as other local groups that are fighting for human rights. So welcome to all 4 of our guests. We're glad that all 4 of you could be with us today for this very critical conversation about labor in Mississippi. And so before we really dive deep into this conversation about labor in Mississippi, I want to start with you, Sanchione. Can you explain what a labor union is? So can you give us an overview of the collective bargaining process and how labor unions could help us combat income and wealth inequality? Because we've seen over the past several decades that worker productivity has increased, corporate profits have increased, while wages have remained stagnant. So can you talk a little bit about what a labor union is and what a labor union does?
Sure, Matthew. Just want to say thank you to One Voice for having me to share my experience. So, oftentimes when people hear the word union, they associate it with something bad. It has that fear factor behind it, and I just think that that's something that's a systemic oppression that has been passed down by generations. But A labor or a trade union is an organization. That organization is built up of workers that are dedicated to protecting their co-workers or the members that belong to the organization's interests and improving the wages, hours, and working conditions for all of the employees in the workplace. And so we all know, just based off of our experience in Canton, in order to even have a seat at the table, you first have to have enough workers who are interested in forming a union in their workplace and not afraid to sign up on a petition or a union authorization card. And you have to have, the law says that you need a minimum of 30% of the employees who are willing to petition the National Labor Relations Board to have a union election. So that is the whole process of how you form your union. And so when you talk about collective bargaining, once those workers form their union and they have a real seat at the table, then they get a chance to sit down with the executives of the company or the heads of wherever they're employed and discuss the wages and their working conditions. If they don't have that, if they have not even had a election to even be able to be certified to be a union, they're just at-will workers and they're at the mercy of the company. And in most of the southern states, we do know that workers really don't have any rights and they could be fired for any reason. But if you have a union in your workplace, that is a sense of, that gives you a sense of protection where you're hiring and you're firing. There's a process. The company just can't fire you for any reason. They have to have just cause to fire you. And as far as the benefits, I just kind of wanted to share, I did a little homework, and the research tells us that union membership delivers larger wage premiums to Black workers than to white workers. The hourly wages for Black union workers are 14.7% higher than those of their non-union counterparts. And while white unionized workers make up 9.6% higher hourly wages than non-unionized white workers, the impact of increased unionization on racial equality could extend beyond those hourly wage increases. And so I got that information based off of a 2016 study that showed that Black union workers are 17.4% points more likely than non-union workers to have employer-provided health insurance, and 18.3% points more likely to have an employer-sponsored retirement plan. And so those are, if not those two things, this is what we're talking about in society during the COVID pandemic right now, healthcare, and they're trying to take away the Affordable Care Act from people who need it now more than ever. And being able to not just depend on your Social Security benefits when you get 65 or 67, but if you work at a company for 20 to 30 years, being able to negotiate having a defined pension plan that is going to help support you post your post-working years. So that's kind of, I'm hoping that I explained that. Jaribu might want to chime in with something extra when she gets her turn, but I feel like I explained it as simply as I could.
Thanks, Sanchione. Ms. Jaribu, do you have anything you would like to add?
You unmute, Jaribu.
Actually, when something's been stated so clear, there's no need to go over it again. Sanchione did put the period at the end of that sentence. And really, it's good for workers to know the benefits, because we are in a climate of absolute union busting and union hatred and worker hatred for that matter. We saw that with all of the efforts, Sanchione and other champions who led that fight at Nissan. We saw what happened. The employer breaking the law left and right, breaking the laws that have been defined as labor relations laws, breaking the laws, and workers being afraid, workers being retaliated against. So what she says is true. Workers fare better absolutely better in terms of wages, in terms of treatment, in terms of job security, and a contract, an agreement with the employer. So I applaud the work that Sanchione and others keep doing in a place where I think we're 4.3% to 5% union membership. I don't even know if the general public is aware of how few workers have that fundamental human right to be a part of a union. So whatever has been said before, I certainly support that. And I think it is good that people hear those statistics and that they hear about how better off you are if you have a union. Don't let the boss tell you a union is bad. That's the first mistake right there. If the boss says it's bad, it's got to be good. So listen to your leadership, make your own way, and form your own leaders in your workplace. Even if you don't have a union, you can have a worker committee. You could have a worker committee that could go to a union and ask for representation. But don't listen to the boss about a union, because of course they're going to tell you it's bad.
Thank you, Mr. Rubu. Thank you, Sanchione. So our next question is, what has the COVID-19 pandemic revealed about working conditions in the state? So what stories are you hearing, or what have been some of your experiences? And what role do unions play in rectifying any problems that exist? So we'll start with you, Miss LaTanya Hamilton.
Hi. I can kind of go along with Sanchione and what Ms. Hill said. I'm one of those workers. We have a strong leadership at Siemens. My experience, they went beyond with the union reps and with the company, trying to make sure we safe. They on petition the cafeteria. They make sure everybody stays 6 feet apart. They did everything they could for us, the CDC. Now, my son contracted COVID-19 and he was off work for 2 weeks. My company allowed me to be off work 2 weeks too with pay. So he tested again today and he's still positive. So I called my company and I might have to take off another week or two with pay. So I think they have tried to go beyond, because they know we do have strong leadership at Siemens, union presence at Siemens. It was something else I was gonna say. But they have did everything they could to make sure that everybody's safe. Out of 400 people, only 5 people had contracted the COVID-19. As soon as they contracted, they immediately sent them to the doctor, and anybody that's been in contact with them to the doctor. So I think we have a pretty good program because we do have strong leadership, and it really shows what a union can do.
Yes, I would like to second that emotion. Sister Hamilton, again, you've hit it, because what you've described is the type of workplace that all workers deserve. But when we look at, for example, there's some articles that have come out recently about the plight of Black and brown poultry workers in the state of Mississippi. Thousands across the country, by the way, food processing workers, 6,000 plus, have contracted COVID, an untold number of deaths because they won't tell the truth about the stats. But one of the things you mentioned, I have someone right now who contracted COVID. She believes she may have contracted it at work, but she was sent home, and her husband also contracted COVID and he passed. And when he passed, she was at home on quarantine when the employer fired her. So she had no union representation. She had no protection from being fired and from being retaliated against, basically because she was associated with someone who had COVID. I was reading a story about a sister who works at one of the infamous poultry plants, and I'm not going to mess up One Voice by naming company names. I mean, if y'all start that, I'll step in and finish it, but I won't name the name of the company because I don't know what their policy is in terms of outing companies or even boycotting companies. But there are some really low down and dirty poultry plants, and one where this woman worked, she contracted COVID, and her 2 small daughters also contracted COVID. She was not given any kind of compensation. She had to go home. And what she's saying is true. And what others are saying about these plants that are unprotected and unregulated. Basically, you go in and you work. And essential workers obviously have never had the opportunity to go home and stay home. And that's why we are fighting tooth and nail, trying to get people organized, trying to get people not to be so afraid of the union. That's why the role that you and Sanchione play as Black women organizers is so important, because many of the workers that we're talking about are low-wage African workers, workers of African descent, brown workers who have nobody even to look up to in terms of leadership. And that's why we really are trying our best to make sure we support Black women's leadership and working class leadership, because these things are happening to our people, and our people are suffering like they've never suffered before. COVID has been introduced. And before that, of course, and during that, our people laying in pools of blood because of police brutality and because of white terror. And now we have COVID. We're just really bombarded as a people. And so your efforts really are needed. So important.
And that's a great point that you raised, Ms. Rebu, about the poultry plants, because I know not too long ago, in the middle of the pandemic, the USDA allowed some poultry plants to increase their bird per minute speed, which forces folks into closer proximity to one another on production lines, which increases the likelihood that people will contract COVID-19. So here you have, the federal government, who's supposed to have protections in place to keep workers safe, but they're putting profit above people. So thanks for raising that. But
you're absolutely right. I gotta jump in on this. You're absolutely right. There was a situation where OSHA was inspecting a poultry plant because the workers had anonymously called OSHA. And while they were there, they started talking about their workplace conditions, and the USDA officer told them, "Oh, we're just here to inspect the chickens. We're not here to address issues concerning labor rights." So that notion of the product being important, but not the people who process the product, they're not being considered at all. So that stat that you raised is one that's really alarming and frightening, and something that we have to really expose. We got to make sure people know those stats.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I will like, oh, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, okay. I would like to say now, I have friends that work different sectors. I have one that's in the medical field, and she had the same thing. Her husband got COVID, and she had to take off without pay. So I mean, there's a lot of sectors that's not doing their employees right, because they don't have union presence. So they are treating their workers poorly.
Absolutely.
Right. And Mr. J. Jackson, you got anything you would like to add?
Yes, I would like to add. I work for the public sector, and actually, I feel like COVID-19 has actually showed the lack of compassion and the care that's going on in the city of Jackson. Because I really believe that even though we are deemed essential workers, I don't believe that some of the work that we do is actually essential enough for us to be interacting with the public. And I feel like at our actual location that I feel like that the actual protocol is not being followed, because we're supposed to be social distancing, but in our truck at times there may be 4 people or there may be 5 people inside of a truck, and you can't actually practice social distancing if you're inside of a work truck. And as well as it being so hot outside, you can't really wear a mask if you're cutting grass or trying to unclog a ditch or something like that. I really feel like in Ms. LaToya's case, Siemens, they're doing a great job as far as doing everything they're supposed to do as far as their employees. But as far as city workers, I don't really believe everything is being disinfected and handled to the right abilities. I believe that they're giving out masks and following some protocol, but I really don't believe, in certain instances, if a person inside of your truck tests positive for COVID-19, you should automatically have everybody in that truck tested, or they should be off for a certain period of time.
Definitely.
I don't think that is actually being followed to procedure. So I don't believe that it is. like also, I know some of the people at my job, in my location, have been tested, but they still have them coming to work before the results are found out. So I feel like that's kind of, you know what I'm saying, that's a contradiction in itself, because why would you test me, but you're still having me come to work and be around people if I don't know if I'm testing positive? As well as, I don't know exactly the guidelines or how did it, you know, with the confidentiality as far as giving people's name, who's tested positive for it. But I feel like as a person, if you're on my truck, I feel like everybody in that truck should be informed that somebody has tested positive.
That's right.
Because I have 2 small kids. I have a 3-month-old, and I don't feel like that is fair to a worker who's coming to work that can contract something that he may not show symptoms of, but I'm around other people that know that they have tested positive, and they're not telling us that. So I really believe that city workers in the city, I believe that they're not following the proper procedures, because we've had many people test, and it was until somebody made an uproar about it that they actually disinfected the building and made everybody go home. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. And that's why, and to the test of the union, everybody that is a part of CWA, Make CWA, they have actually been giving out guidelines and telling us the actual procedures, what is supposed to happen during this time. Because like at my job, we haven't had any meetings or any safety meetings regarding what is supposed to actually take place during this time. So we don't know what we can do, what are the guidelines, how many days we're supposed to get off, none of that. So I really feel like the city is lacking in that department, to be honest.
Jay, we have a meeting once a week. If somebody do have if it's an outbreak, somebody do have it, they call everybody to the office. They can't get names because of the HIPAA law, but what they do, you can kind of figure out who it is if you work at a place. So they'll tell the whoever the person is, they'll tell the safety man, and what they'll do is whoever that person tell them that they've been around, they'll get with them and they'll send them home. So we pretty much know who have it, and if we feel like that person didn't realize that we was around them, we'll go to that safety man and tell them we was also we've been exposed as well, and we can go to the doctor.
See, at least that's something. We don't have any of those things in place at my job to actually say, well, I understand, like I said, you can't give out the name because of certain laws, but we don't have anything that's even stating or saying. The only thing that we were told is, like, now I'm off. We were off from Wednesday all the way to Monday. But they were told, if you want to go get tested, you can get tested. During this time, we'll be disinfecting the building or whatever the case may be. But it's only because there is a large number of people that are contracting COVID-19 that they're actually now trying to do something about it. I feel like they're doing too little too late almost.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I said, I feel like it should have been steps in place, already put in place to be able to help the workers. Because just giving somebody a mask or telling them this or that, I don't think that's enough in itself.
I agree.
That's right.
Yep. All right.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. All right. And so our next question is, and I think Mr. Jackson kind of touched on this a little bit, but we'll go ahead and throw it out there. As essential workers continue to be on the front line, which makes them more susceptible to contracting COVID-19, what are some expectations workers should have for the federal and state government and their employers to keep them safe? So, Mr. Jackson, what are some restrictions or regulations or protocols that, as a worker, you would like to see enforced or implemented right now?
Okay, number one, I feel like they should just continue to make sure they supply everybody with masks, supply everybody with hand sanitizer. I feel like they should disinfect and spray down the building more periodically than just coming in after you've seen so many people getting it or whatever the case may be. I feel like that should be a standard. Like, you should, I don't know if it should be every 2 days or every 1 day or something like that, but it should be more periodically than just, okay, well, we're going to come spray it this time and then it may go another 3 weeks without spraying. I feel like they should implement that somehow. And also I feel like automatically, I mean, I don't know if this is part of this or not, but I feel like every essential worker should get some type of compensation as far as being on the front line, period. Like overall, whether it comes from the federal, whether it comes from the state, especially with the city of Jackson, I feel like there should be some type of compensation because we are putting our life on the line. Like I said, with me having 2 kids, I feel very strongly about this because I feel like I said, there should be some type of, if you say we have to go to work and we have to do this, then there should be some type of compensation for that. And I understand money is not worth your life, but there should still be some type of compensation for this.
Agreed. And there are only some people who are even eligible for what they call hazard pay.
Yeah.
And, every worker who works in a job where they cannot take off because the city would collapse if you didn't do your job, or the hospital would collapse, or this agency would collapse if you weren't there to do the work. If you're that essential, then the compensation should reflect that, and there should be hazard pay. Only a small class of workers are eligible for it in the state. The governor's woefully inadequate, executive orders point to a certain percentage, tiny percentage of workers that are even eligible for hazard pay and paid sick leave for everyone.
Exactly.
Regardless of whether you work for the city or whether you work for Taco Bell, paid sick leave.
Yes.
And childcare, because we talked to parents today who said, even if they're forced to send their children back to school, even if they're forced to keep their children home, they don't know if they can because they can't afford childcare.
Exactly.
Stay off work, they're not going to get paid and they're going to get fired. So essential workers are always caught in that catch-22 where they have to accept nothing to get something, and the nothing is not sufficient. City workers need to be union. City workers need to be union, no question about it, because then some of the issues you raised about the disparities in terms of the way workers are not fully protected. And when there's an outbreak, there's supposed to be an evacuation. You're not supposed to just be working along and people call you in the office and say, oh, by the way, somebody got COVID. No, they're supposed to close down and evacuate, strip that place down, clean it thoroughly with a professional licensed cleaner that deals with infestations of viruses. It can't just be janitors being forced to do that work without being licensed or certified. It's got to be the people who have that company, that contract that can come in and do it. And no, they can't give the names, but they definitely have to tell you if someone in your workplace has COVID. They have to tell you that. They cannot not tell you. You have a right to know, because then you need to go get tested. And you're a father of a baby, you know. I mean, you are at risk, and so are your children and your family.
Exactly.
So testing is something that needs to be done. Once it's spotted in the workplace, there should be protocols in place where people don't have to worry about their jobs. But essential workers absolutely do have to worry about their jobs when they are not represented by a union. And Ms. Hamilton's point is clear. Sanchione's point is clear. That's the difference. No protection because of how you work and the fact that you're unrepresented at work.
I just want to also just bring up one point. Because this pandemic has blown up, I must say that you have more workers now more than ever that want to be a part of a union because they see the need. They have no one out there advocating for them. And they recognize that they have to have a process in place. So if something like this happens again, somebody's going to be held accountable. There is a process, people will be informed, and the company will be forced contractually to protect their workers.
That's right.
Thank you, Sanchione. And while we're at it, Ms. Jaribu, can you talk to us a little bit about what a worker center is and what role worker centers play during this pandemic?
Okay, sure. The Mississippi Worker Center for Human Rights was born December 30th, 1996. We are to date the oldest English-speaking, we're the first English-speaking worker center that is a worker center that's not connected to a union in the United States. Because we're Black-led, often that fact is omitted. But we are a worker center. We have a membership-based organization. Our membership pays $25 a year if they can afford it, if they're working. If not, the membership is free. And by and large, the workers that we stand with are non-union workers. And that is not because we are anti-union. That is because 95% of the population of workers in the state and across the South, it's even worse. We have one of the highest percentages of union density, believe it or not. So South Carolina, I think, is 2.3, North Carolina 1.2. But that said, we stand in the gap and work with and partner with labor union organizations to bring about a new day. We have worked and partnered with Sanchione, with the UAW. We've helped to provide training. We've stood with them in battle around trying to get the union and Nissan, and trying to also just make sure workers are protected from sexual harassment, from racial harassment, and all manner of abuses that workers suffer from. So that's our work. We're a human rights organization. We address the issues and the remedies by looking through the lens of human rights. We believe it's not enough to say a worker's rights are civil rights. We believe that every worker has a human right to organize. In fact, it is enshrined within the Universal Declaration that every person has a right to join a labor union organization. And they should be free from retaliation. They should be free from unemployment as a result of trying to make that happen. So we try to stand in solidarity. We also try to do work that is in concert and complementary to the organizing work that the labor unions are doing. We try to do our own brand of organizing, which means consciousness raising, which means letting people know that this is something you don't have to take. The things that they do to you, you do not have to accept it. So we've been successful in a few cases where, well, more than a few, but we've taken on some of the largest employers like Northrop Grumman Ship Systems, where nooses were being made, and we represented two people who were victims of attempted lynchings in the workplace. We represented lazy boy workers in Leland, Mississippi, where they were one day salaried, the next day they were piece workers, where they were getting $80 in their check when they used to get $600. So their wages were stolen. So we work, and the way that we do the work is in coalition, is in partnership with other organizations that are dedicated to protecting workers. We provide trainings. We do public events, including an annual Workers' Memorial Day program, which many of the folks that you've mentioned are partnering with us. One Voice, Sanchione, through UAW and beyond UAW has always been a partner of ours in terms of Worker Memorial Day. In April, we had a webinar called Dark Work, Devalued and Excluded. And that webinar specifically spoke to the issue of Black essential workers. And Sanchione was one of our speakers, as well as a sister from the New Orleans Workers Center. So what we do is we try to build coalitions. We try to work with people. We try to make sure the boss is the target. We try to let workers know it's not your fault that you're in this situation. And if you want to get out of this situation, you got to fight back. So we try to represent that in terms of being a fight back organization, small but mighty. We've been ebb and flow in terms of funds from the House. We don't hardly get those anymore because our message is clear. Our message is intentionally radical and Black, and our message is based on human rights. So we found that many times over, like other organizations probably sitting on this call, have found that the clearer you are and the more intentional you are about Black life and Black survival, then the funding tends to dry up. And so you have to have other means of supporting yourself. We have a dues base where our members contribute, and we also have a pretty good public offering system where people will donate to help us keep the work going. But we by no means have a large budget, but we feel like the work is large because we partner with folks who can help us build resources and help us get the word and the message out there. So yeah, worker centers have been embraced at times, and they've also been decried because we've been accused of dual unionism. And that was an erroneous assumption. That was a misnomer when certain types of labor unions, and interestingly enough, they were mostly the trade unions, predominantly led by white males who used to call and still do call workers' centers dual unionist. And we are not dual unionists. We are pro-union. I've been a member of 3. The Musicians Cafe, Local 802 in New York, OPEIU, Clerical Union, and also NICOSH. I was with OCAR, Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers. I've always been supportive of unions, and our organization is pro-union. And I think the whole thing about worker centers is that they are here because many, many workers have nothing but the will to stand with labor. Is how we get our power, is how we can stand up tall and say we are a workers' rights organization, because we are not anti-union. We're pro-workers being organized, and we believe that every worker has a right to be in a union and to be a leader, to be an organizer, or to just be a member if they don't want to be a leader. They have a right to a contract. And so that's some of what that's our demand as well: a living wage, a contract, full benefits. And we're against the temporary system. We're battling that right now. We're doing a campaign against temp workers who work, not against the workers, but against companies who employ temp workers for 10 years and still call you a temp with no benefits. That's a union busting practice. And we want to see that thing shut down completely.
And can you let folks know, for the people out there that might want to use your worker center as a resource, how they can get in contact with you?
Yes, we have a field cell number. Our number is 662-931-0111, 931-0111. But if you should ever lose that, you can always go through our sister organization, One Voice, and they'll give you my details.
Thank you, Ms. Jaribu.
Thank
All right,
you.
so our next question is for Ms. Sanchione Butler. Are there any initiatives that the AFL-CIO is currently involved in?
Yeah, Matthew, I kind of just want to say, just based off of my organizing experience and now me serving in my new role with the Mississippi AFL-CIO as the political campaign director, the power that workers and Mississippians have is definitely through the ballot box. And so my job is to continue to try to go out and let people know that real change has got to start on a local level all the way up to DC. And once people start really focusing in on making changes within our city and local and state government, that's a step in the right direction. And what I mean by that is we've got to continue to push at our state capitol to get a livable wage for people, to change the workman comp laws, so that people have more than just the short period of time before they have nothing. It's 52 weeks is not enough, and that's just the truth. And we've got a lot of work to do. We need to be looking at people being able to have paid time off. And again, because workers they don't have a union, they don't have that language in their contract, our essential workers are being forced back to work. And again, as the gentleman said, Jay, putting the family at risk because they have no other means of resources. They've got to take care of their family. And so with that, one of the main initiatives that we're pushing is called Common Sense Economics. And it empowers working people by providing information on critical economic issues and how these issues impact our daily lives. So we started out at the beginning of the year having some of these sessions in person, but because of COVID, we've been able to readjust, and now we're offering these common sense economic courses virtually. And we're not only offering those classes with just our affiliates. We are again, as Jaribu has said, we're partnering with community-based groups, clergy, folks like One Voice, and the leaders of these various groups can participate in these trainings, these virtual trainings. And the purpose of it is we don't know how to have a simple conversation with our family members, our co-workers, our church members about economics 101 and how it affects our daily lives, globalization, immigration, race in the economy and what role it plays, and trade in the economy, women in the economy, young workers. So this is what this virtual program looks like. We have various modules, and the modules last 30 to 45 minutes. And they can, if anybody's interested, I'll leave my information with you guys, Matthew, so that I have a calendar of various of the different little topics that someone may be interested in. And again, we look at things in a big scope, but we have to kind of just bring it on in and take that onion and peel it back one layer at a time. And we make things seem so hard, but it's a simple, we got to start out with our friends and family and the people who we deal with all the time, having those simple conversations. And so that's kind of what the initiative that the Mississippi AFL-CIO is focusing on, is making changes through policy and being able to have those conversations to educate our friends and family and our constituents.
Thank you so much, Sanchione.
I could just piggyback in support of what Sanchione just said. It is so remarkable how things just come back around. I first learned about common sense economics through Bill Fletcher when he was the director of education. And I was looking for something the other day, and I found my copy of Common Sense Economics, the first packet that I think one of the first packets they put together. And I also want to shout out to Sanchione because she does definitely believe in training up workers. I can remember a couple of times that I was invited to come and train workers around not just health and safety, but around addressing race discrimination and retaliation in the workplace. And I wanted to just lift up a couple of programs that the Worker Center is doing. The hallmark of our organization has always been door to door. So obviously we can't do the Canvas for Human Needs in the way that we normally do it, but we've been able to reach hundreds of people this summer through our Fannie Lou Hamer Emerging Leaders Program, where they've actually been interviewing people on the phone, from parents about going back to school or having their children go back to school. How do they feel about that? To reminding people about the census, which, by the way, everybody under the sound of my voice, just like Sanchione told you, you have to get registered, you have to vote, you also have to get counted. It's important that you get counted. Right now, the government is trying to play games with the counting, with the redistricting of the counting. We've got to make sure that our people get counted. So we're doing that. We're doing canvases around that. We're launching a billboard this week that will educate parents about their rights under COVID in terms of the way children should return if they have to return to school. And we also are doing work around basic issues concerning ADA and discrimination around ADA. We're having some trainings. We have a monthly workers circle that we do where we provide trainings, and we also grab stories. So right in concert with and complementary to what's already been said, I wanted to share those things with you.
Thank you, Mr. Rebu. And so right now we're going to open it up for question and answer from the audience. So we'll see if anybody has any questions for our panelists.
Matthew, there was one question about explaining what Mississippi being a right to work state is.
Okay. Anybody want to take a crack at that one?
I'll take a crack at it.
Okay.
Mississippi being a right to work state simply means that if you have a union in your facility, you don't have to pay dues. You don't have to belong. When you hear closed shop, those closed shop states, when there's a union inside their facilities, they have no option but to pay dues. That's the difference. Right to work state means that you can have a union in your workplace and not be a part of it by paying dues or being a member, but you reap the benefits of what the contract says. I call them freeloaders.
Yes.
Because you're getting all of the bonuses, the great health care, whatever was negotiated, you just don't have to pay dues.
It is a union busting tactic for sure.
Absolutely.
It really is.
And most companies know, they know because if most facilities are dues checkoffs, so they know if they have a factory of 400 workers and 200 of those workers don't pay dues, they look at that as a weak union, and that it's a tactic that they can actually come in and try to
Decertify.
decertify the union because they don't see that the membership is strong. So they use that as a tactic.
Yes.
So you're definitely stronger in numbers in anything that you do. We all know that.
Thank you, Sanchione. Deontay, we got any more questions for our panelists?
That's all I see.
That's it? Okay. I think that might be it, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's
Well,
been
thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
Hey,
Ms.
nice to
Teresa.
meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. I'll be in touch with you so I can
All
get some
right, brother.
information.
Please do.
Thank you, Mr.
Y'all take
Reed.
care.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
See
Thank
you
Mr.
tomorrow, Sanchione.
Okay, Jaribu.
Thank y'all.
Bye, Latanya. Thank
Bye.
y'all. Bye,
Bye,
man.
Latanya. Nice to
Bye.
meet you.
All right.
And we'll see everybody again, same time next Friday. For a new conversation. But want to send a special thanks to our state president, Reverend Robert James, our executive director, Dr. Corey Wiggins, and the executive director, One Voice, Mrs. Deshaunby Lambright Haynes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.